Hello and welcome to Pastor Well. I'm Hershael York, Dean of the School of Theology at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm also the Pastor Emeritus of Buckron Baptist Church in Frankfort. Pastor Well is dedicated to helping servants of the Lord Jesus Christ be faithful in ministry by talking about things that matter, especially to pastors, that aid us in the calling that God's placed on our lives. One of the things that I've talked about in the past and continue to encourage pastors to do is to get mentors. Today, I specifically want to talk about my mentor. Now, I have two primary mentors in life. One is my dad, and of course, he would shape my life greatly. But the other is someone I met while I was in seminary, and that is the late, great Dr. Adrian Rogers, who was pastor of the Bellevue Baptist Church, three-time president of the Southern Baptist Convention, champion and architect of the conservative resurgence. There's just so many things that we could say about Dr. Rogers, but I want to talk about what I learned from Adrian Rogers in hopes that, first of all, you'll learn some of these things too. And secondly, I want to encourage you how to get mentors without necessarily having to take a lot of their time. Because Adrian Rogers, first of all, he was pastor of a mega church. He was a very busy man and much in demand. Everybody wanted a piece of Adrian Rogers. And I met him when I was 27 years old. I'd heard him preach a lot on recordings and had heard him in different conferences and conventions. But when I was 27 years old, I enrolled at Mid-America Seminary, which at that time was right across the street from Bellevue Baptist Church. And a mutual friend of ours, Dr. Laverne Butler, who at that time was pastor of the Ninth and Old Baptist Church here in Louisville, he set me up. He got me an appointment with Dr. Rogers. Now, I wanted to learn everything I could from Adrian Rogers. And so my very first week on campus as a student at Mid-America there in Memphis, I got an appointment, courtesy of Dr. Laverne Butler, with Adrian Rogers, and I went in to ask him for a job. Now, I had a job in mind, but it was not one that he necessarily had need for. But what did I have to lose? Ask, you have not because you ask not. So I went in and I got that appointment with Dr. Rogers, and man, he was so gracious. Here I was, brand spanking new student at the seminary across the street from Bellevue, and I go in his office. Laverne Butler had written him a letter about me, and now at that time I had already had, before I went to seminary, a lot of Greek on my transcript, including a master's in Greek from the University of Kentucky. And I really studied preaching and preachers. So I asked him for a job. I asked him to let me be his research assistant. I said, Dr. Rogers, I know how you preach. I'm not suggesting in any way that I would write your sermons, but I know the kind of thing you're looking for, the kind of illustrations you use. I think I could help you with preliminary work for your sermons, and then assemble things that it would save you a lot of the early work in the sermon, and you could use and put things together. Now, that was an audacious thing for a 27-year-old brand new student to ask Adrian Rogers. And here's the way he responded. Now, if you ever heard Adrian Rogers speak or preach, he just had the most majestic voice ever. And he had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world when he talked to you. And he made you feel good no matter what was going on. He sort of pumped you up. And his response to me was, now, Hershael, if I had anybody do that for me, you would be the man. But I feel like I'd be like David in Saul's armor to have someone with your intelligence and great mental capacity to help me with my preaching. Well, I'm just sort of stuck in my ways, and I've got friends who have a research assistant, but I just don't know that I could even function with that. So I'm going to have to decline your offer. But man, if I got anybody to do that, it would be you. And then he proceeded to just extol my virtues. Now, I left his office as unemployed as I was when I came in, but he made me feel great about myself. And right there, I learned something. I learned how to say no to people. I learned what a gracious man, that even when I went in there with a crazy idea, something he needed like he needed, I don't know, a pair of tennis shoes to preach or something. He just didn't need what I was offering. And yet, man, he was so gentle. He was so kind. He made me feel great. And boy, right there, I thought, this is a great man. I figured out the way that he let me down. And you know what? I I wanted to emulate that. The second thing that happened in that conversation was he took note of me, and from then on, he would reach out to me. He would do things for me. He When he was on campus at Mid America, he would look me up and he would talk to me. And through the years, I just can't tell you what all he did for me. Just noticing me, even in turning me down. I used to be able to sing back then. Several times they had me sing at Bellevue before he preached, and what a great honor that was. And I began to get time from him. I would ask him questions. Whenever I get just a few minutes with him, I always had questions at the ready to ask, and he was always gracious to answer. And I figured out then that if I was going to have any kind of a mentoring relationship with him, that it was going to have to be in little snippets and mostly from observing him. And I didn't need a lot of personal time with him. I just watched the way he did things. And from time to time, when I was around him, I would ask him, "How do you do such and such?" Like one time I asked him, "Dr. Rogers, you pastor a huge church, and everybody I know after the service wants to talk to you, and I notice you hang around." And he told me, absolutely. He said, part of shepherding is being available to people. Now, again, this is Adrian Rogers. If anybody had the excuse to zip out the door and retreat to a study with a security team, it was him. And yet he did not do that. And I said, well, I know people, like, they take too much of your time. Sometimes people talk to you too long. And he said, I've got some people on my staff that stand close by. And if someone is taking an inordinate amount of time, they can come up and say, "Hey, why don't you tell me about that? And I'll relay to the pastor what you've said." Or I'll say, "Here, I think Jim Bob can help you with that even better than I can." And I'll just sort of graciously pass them off. But he said, "I'll tell you what I don't do is I don't look over their shoulder at the next person." He told me, he said, whenever you're talking to somebody, give them eye contact and look at them as though they're the only person around. Don't be looking over their shoulder or seeing who else is walking by. And let me just interject here. When I go to places like the Southern Baptist Convention, I run into folks, and sometimes I'm talking to them, and they're looking over their shoulder. It's hard to have a conversation with them because they're looking past me to wave at other people. And Adrian Rogers taught me, don't do that. Give all your attention to that person as long as they have, and as long as you have. If you need to pass them off, you graciously do that. But don't make them feel rushed. And he said, don't make them feel like they're unimportant. And he said, my people know that I'm going to stand there. As long as they're willing to wait for me, they'll get their turn. But I'm going to talk to that person only until we're through. And man, through the years, I did that. As a pastor, I would hang around the end of the service. Tanya and I have always been really the last ones to leave. Sometimes we frustrate our janitors because we stay there so long. And whoever wants to see me, they get to see me. And people do learn that they'll hang around, that I'll hang around and talk to them if they'll be patient and wait. And you sort of discipline them not to interrupt. The other thing he taught me was to make people feel good about themselves, to encourage them. One time when I was a young pastor, I called and let him know that I was going to be going through Memphis on a Sunday evening, and said I'd love to have dinner with you and Mrs. Rogers after the service if I could. And he told me, he said, indeed, we'd love to do that. Here's what I want you to do. I'm not going to park in my parking place. When you come, you pull up in the spot marked pastor there by my office, and the security team will be waiting for you. They'll usher you into my office, and you and Tanya, Miss Rogers, and I will have a little bit of time before the service, and then we'll go out afterwards. Now, you think about that. He wanted me to have the experience of pulling up in that pastor's parking spot at Bellevue Baptist Church. I was like 30 years old. Now, think about the the insight that he had. And you know what? He did that for 400 other guys. I'm under no pretense that he did it just for me. He was doing it for a lot of guys. And it just taught me to do that for people, to encourage them, to build them up, to take time for people as a pastor, as a husband, as a father, as a denominational leader. He always showed grace, and he was always pointing people to Christ. Every letter I ever got from him, he would sign it something like, God is love, Jesus is wonderful, Adrian Rogers. And I treasure those things. You're going to have mentors in your life who aren't going to be able to give you a lot of time, but if you watch them, you learn from them. He taught me things that nobody else was talking about. I asked him one time, people come up to you and they say, you remember me? What do you say when they do that? He said, you know what? Don't ever say to somebody, now what's your name? Or don't lie and say, oh yeah, I remember you. If you don't, he said, here's what you say. Now help me with your name. He said, it doesn't sound as offensive as what's your name? And you're not lying and telling them you remember them. But everybody wants to help you. Say, help me with your name, and they'll help you. Now, what a neat little thing. And he just always thought about things like that. He taught me how to get people out of my office. People get an appointment with you, and you've got a 30-minute slot, and you've got the next appointment, and yet sometimes it's going long. He said, here's what you do. You have your secretary or assistant sort of buzz in or come to the door and say, Pastor, it's time for your next appointment. And he said, you can then respond, say, hey, Ryan, can you give me 5 more minutes with Jim Bob here? He said, this is a way that it lets them know they've got 5 more minutes, but they feel valued. Hey, you want 5 more minutes? And it sort of gives them a notice and yet an appreciation. Again, the brilliance of figuring out how to move people along, but to be so gracious that they don't mind, they don't feel devalued. Adrian Rogers taught me how to think like that. He was an incredible preacher of the word, an incredible pastor, and yet he paid attention to the small things. And I learned that from him. And in my pastoral ministry classes now for 28 years, I've taught the things that he taught me, and I'm passing them on to you. I want you to find people that you can observe what's the spirit and the standard that they set. But more than that, whom can you influence? For whom can you be that? You may never be a preacher like Adrian Rogers, but you can have as much grace as he had. You can have as much kindness as he had. You can have as much of the Holy Spirit as he had. You don't have to have that level of talent or giftedness or that size church, but you can still be a person of grace and kindness and love and thoughtfulness, because that's really what the Spirit produces in us. And if you do that, you find mentors, you mentor others, then you're going to pastor well.